is Dr. Nathan Groot. I am a music instructor at the Arkansas School for Mathematics, Sciences, and the Arts, where I teach string ensemble and applied music lessons among other music courses. Today we're going to be taking a look at the excerpt for violin Danse Macabre. This is part of the North Region's Cadet audition packet for the years 2023 through 2026. You will find this in your Strictly Strings Book 2 on page 12. Couple things to notice in our information packet. Make sure you're following all of the fingerings, bowings, make sure that you're following the repeats, and in addition to that we have a tempo that we're given, and that is 140. If you can't quite play it at 140 yet, that's okay. We're going to work on building up that tempo, but before we build it up, we got to make sure we have a solid foundation. So the first things you might want to look at when you approach a new piece of music are the key signature and the time signature. Now you'll notice that we don't have a key signature here. Does it mean we're in C major or A minor? Maybe, maybe not. This is a weird one. We don't have a key signature, but the piece itself is implying something like G minor. Now, you are auditioning probably your first time ever. You've maybe been playing a couple of years. Don't worry too much about what I just said there about what the key is implying. The important thing to remember is that there are no accidentals in our key signature. So the key signature is not telling us to change anything. However, we do have accidentals throughout the piece. So when you see like an E flat at the beginning, just make sure you're thinking low 1, that you really are thinking about how each of those works. And remember, the rule for an accidental is it is good for the whole measure until the bar line. Once you reach a bar line, the accidentals from that measure have been canceled out, and you only use what is in the following measure. So each measure is a self-contained little unit with those accidentals. So for example, in that first measure, we have an E flat and an A. Right after it, it's notated again, but there isn't a flat in front of the E. It's because we're in the same measure, but we're just going to keep that as an E flat. So there are 2 E flats in measure 1, even though it's only marked once, and that's because it carries through the whole measure. Okay, so time signature. We are in 3/4. There are 3 quarter notes in each measure. Rhythmically, there's nothing really very complicated going on here. We have quarter notes, we have half notes, we have eighth notes. So we might have 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3 for those first few measures. A couple measures later, when the eighth notes come in, 1 and 2, 3, 1 and 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1. So just sort of making sure you're really clear on how those rhythms work. We're not going to delve too deeply into them today, but if you have additional questions about that, just let me know. So we have some repeat signs in here. I'm going to put something up on the screen just to show you sort of how this works. So we play the first line, we get to the second line, second measure of the second line. There's a little repeat sign that tells us that's where we're going to bounce back to, so just remember that. So we're just going to go from that through the first ending. Now at the end of the second line, there is another repeat sign. Where do we go from there? We go back to the second measure of the second line. We continue on, we go to the 5th measure of the second line. We've already played the first ending, so that means we need to jump down to the second ending, which is at the beginning of the 3rd line. And then we just continue on, and then that's it. But just making sure that you're really clear on how that works. The first ending, second ending, repeats. It can be easy to get a little lost in that sometimes. So I think it might be most useful just to go through this chronologically, now that we've sort of laid out some of the very basics that we're looking at. So we have a marking here that says non-divisi. That means that we're going to play both of these notes simultaneously. If you're ever playing in an orchestra and it says divisi, that means that you and your stand partner will play one note or the other, top or bottom. This non-divisi, however, means that you're going to play both of them at the same time. So that means we are playing a double stomp in this excerpt. What's a double stomp? It's where you play more than one string at the same time. So we do it on accident all the time. Maybe when we don't mean to. It's kind of hard to do when we want to, though. With our bow, just remember that changing strings all has to do with the angle of your arm. So if you're playing your A string and you want to play your D string with it, you don't need to press hard, right? So if you press hard, maybe you'll get it, but you'll get a really crunchy sound. So all you have to do is slightly change the angle. If you find that you're getting too much A, up a little bit. Getting too much D, down a little bit. Okay? So you don't need to press any harder. It's just a matter of angles. Okay? So we're going to be playing low 1 E flat along with our open A string. At the beginning of this piece. Now, one thing that might happen is you might struggle to not press or not touch the A string here. I don't know if you can see that. You might struggle not to touch the A string here with your left index finger. So if that happens, it'll sound like this. Instead of where your first finger is accidentally touching the A. That all has to do with the angle. You might need to pivot your elbow slightly towards yourself and just look down this way and see if you can see even the tiniest little bit of your finger touching the A string. That's enough to interfere with it vibrating. So just change that angle, use the tip of your finger, and make sure that you're not touching the A string while you play this double stop. So let's talk about the bow. We have a couple of markers for the bow here. We have LH, which means lower half. So remember, we have the upper half, the lower half, this is the tip, this is the frog, this is the middle. So we want to be in the lower half for this, right? It can be really easy to accidentally use too much bow. Whoops, I'm out of bow, and I'm at the tip. So we have to work to keep ourselves closer into the frog. This is especially difficult at slower tempos. So when you're practicing, let's say like 60 or something, just save your bow as much as you can there at the beginning so that you're not practicing getting way out at the tip. Make sure you're staying in the lower half throughout this. Additionally, we have a dynamic marking here, fortissimo. This is huge. This should be a huge dynamic, right? So, how do we change our dynamics? We have weight, we have speed, we have contact point, something I cover a lot in other videos. So weight is the amount of weight, speed, how fast you're going, contact point, where you are in relation to the fingerboard and the bridge. So, we can't really use a lot of speed here, because if we do, we're going to get out to the tip. We're not going to be able to stay at the lower half of the bow. So that means we need to regulate our weight and our contact point mostly here. So, heavy and close to the bridge. What else do we see here? We have an articulation. See that little dot under the note on the third beat? That is a staccato. Long, short, long, short, long, short, long, short. So we need to make those staccatos nice and short. I'm cheating a little bit. I'm going down, up, down, up, down. So I'm coming off the string a little bit. I'm just giving it a little bit of a flick of the wrist. You can do that. If you find that a little bit too difficult, you can just keep it on the string. If you're keeping it on the string though, just remember to stop your bow. So you can do either the sort of the flick of the wrist and coming off the string a little bit. If you're able to do it, that's great. If not, just keep it on the string, but make sure to stop the bow for that staccato. So that's the first 4 measures handled. Now starting in measure 4, we have the introduction of eighth notes. 1 and 2, 3, 1 and 2, 3. Okay, so just keep that. We're still at the lower half, right? Beats 2 and 3 have staccato. Da-da, short, short, da-da, short, short, right? Now, the next 2 measures, everything's short. These last two measures of line 1, it can be easy to kind of lose our sense of the 3/4, and that's because we have a hemiola going on here. So it sort of sounds like it's 1 2 1 2 1 2 1, but just keep in your mind 1 2 3 1 2 3 1. If you're able to emphasize that hemiola a little bit, all the better. But just make sure that you're keeping a steady pulse, a steady tempo, and making sure that these remain quarter notes. 1 2 3 1 2 3 1. So here's the first line. Okay, so we've made it to the second line with this downbeat. Now, what comes next? We have another section, a new section of music, and we have a new dynamic that goes with it, mezzo piano. So we're going from fortissimo down to mezzo piano. This means that we need to do something different with our bow, right? So we were close to the bridge using a heavy bow. Now we're moving further away from the bridge using a lighter bow. And we're going to be able to use a little bit more bow. This is legato. This is very connected. This is a much more lyrical and singing section than what came before. So we can use our bow a little bit more and use our speed variable just a little bit. So less weight, more speed, and further away from the bridge here. The third beat of this first measure can be thought of as kind of like a pickup. So we have 3 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2. Something interesting happens here on the third beat of the fourth measure, and that is we can make a choice here about a fingering. So in our instructions it says we must follow all printed fingerings. That's true. However, it doesn't say that we can't add a fingering that isn't written in at all. If we played this with 1 1, this is what would happen. We'd have a slide from this E natural to this E flat, okay? It doesn't sound very nice, at least not to me. So what I propose is that we do a finger replacement. So we've just played E with our first finger. On the bow change, bring that E down to an E flat and put our second finger down. Try that a couple times, replacing the first finger with the second finger. Okay, so what that looks like in context is this. 0 3 3 2 2 1 finger replacement, 2 2 1 1 0 high 1, and then of course we repeat. So as long as you do it on the bow change and you practice that finger replacement, you can completely hide that E to E flat, what would be a slide. The slide could work, but I really recommend the finger replacement here. Notice there are lots of accidentals through here. Make sure that you're keeping your low twos, your high twos, all of that straight. So remember, with an F natural, that's going to be a low 2. With an F sharp, that's going to be a high 2. If you're confused about it at all, there are some arrows that are very helpful that are pointing up for higher or down for lower in pitch. We also have in the first ending a little bit of a crescendo. It's only a crescendo from mezzo piano to mezzo forte, but make sure that you are doing something with your bow to make that crescendo happen. What with your bow? Probably a little bit more weight. We're already using a good amount of speed. Moving your contact point could work, but we're going right back to the material again. So you don't want to get too off course. So I think using a little bit more weight to achieve that crescendo up to mezzo forte might be your best bet. So we've repeated. Notice the last note of the second line is the pickup to the repeat, it's D. So make sure you're not playing the whole second line again. It goes from the last measure to the second measure of that line, because you see where that repeat sign is. Play it again, finger replacement. And there, because we've already played the first ending, we're going straight from the middle of the second line down to the third line for the second ending. We now have a crescendo up to forte, okay? So this is going to be a much bigger crescendo. As you play these first few measures of this line, try to work your way back towards the lower half because of what's coming up. So, lower half, and then especially when we do this lift. So a couple things to talk about here with the last 5 measures. We have these lifts, these bow circles. Make sure that you are coming off the string and then setting your bow before you move. So make sure you're not coming from the air, in other words, because it'll just sound sloppy, okay? So just practice at a slow tempo, setting before moving. Make these first beat quarter notes nice and short. And making them short will actually give you more time to lift your bow and be in place for the eighth notes that come after it. The next 2 measures, make sure that they all have that staccato on them. Now, the last measure. If you haven't seen this notation before, these like sort of 3 lines on the stem of a half note, this just means that you are going to tremolo. What's a tremolo? Well, you can check the very top of your page. It says rapid alternating up and down bow strokes. It's just going to be little tiny wiggles, okay? So it's not going to be like anything like that. It's just going to be little tiny bows. Okay? This has a tremolo on it. It also has a fermata on it and a decrescendo on it. So we're going to start out nice and loud because we're at forte, right? Coming down. And the fermata means that we're going to add a little time to it. We're not going to play it exactly 3 beats as notated. So we can go 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, and kind of fade out. Now, fermatas can mean something very specific in terms of how much time you add to it. I think that here, given that it's a solo, you can make your best judgment on that. Don't make it overly long, but 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, something like that. Or even up to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Even up to that would be okay because it's such a fast piece at 140 BPM. Okay, so next thing we're going to do is we're going to start up a metronome and we're going to play it a bunch of times at different tempos. I want to make clear though that there are a lot of different ways to practice. This is not the only way to practice. In fact, sometimes it can be the least efficient way to practice. So make sure that you are isolating things, that you're problem solving, that you are recording yourself and listening back, that you are having other people listen to you and give you feedback, looking at little tiny spots. However, this can be a good way to find your problem spots. If you're playing along with me as we play through this and you find that one spot keeps tripping you up, just pause the video and try to work on that one little spot. This will give you a little bit of an indication of how things are going. So we're just going to go from 60 to 140 and we're just going to keep going up by 10. If you find that like you can play it great at 80 but not at 90, just go up slower with your own metronome, okay? All right, let's get started. 1, 2, 3. hope that this video was somewhat helpful to you. If you have any questions or I didn't address anything, feel free to leave me a comment or send me a message somewhere. I'd be happy to talk more about it or address something if I missed it. Otherwise, I wish you the very best of luck in your audition, and as always, happy practicing.